Number 8. Magnetic fishing treasures. An Australian man who was partaking in the trend of magnet fishing made an amazing discovery. Magnet fishing is an easy hobby to take up, which could be why it seems to be the newest popular thing to do, with hundreds of videos surfacing of people casting their ropes into the water with a magnet attached to the end. For the self-proclaimed Bondi treasure hunter, he got something more impressive than most. He ended up finding almost 50 safes buried in the riverbed of an Amsterdam canal. Lee Weber was out with his friends when his magnet attached itself to a massive safe. Weber finally freed it and broke it open. At first, Weber was disappointed to find a bunch of plastic sleeves, but he quickly changed his tune when he realized the sleeves were holding a hoard of valuable collector's coins. When Weber took a closer look at the coins, he spotted a clue to their origin, an inscription that read Hortus Botanicus 1682 to 1982, Amsterdam. A quick call to the botanical gardens in Amsterdam and Weber found out that a safe had been stolen from the attraction 15 to 20 years earlier, when 500 coins were made to commemorate the 300-year anniversary of the botanical gardens. Although some people might be a little disappointed that the coins were only minted in the 1980s, the theft of the safe and the location of the discovery add to their story, making the entire expedition something of a success. At the very least, it gives the magnetic fisherman the drive he needs to get back out there and find something even more valuable. Number 7. English Coin Hoard. When a former police officer in England unearthed 10 gold coins from the 6th century, he never expected it would land him in jail, but that's just what happened to Officer David Cockle, who used nothing more than a metal detector to locate coins. But it wasn't his amateur sleuthing that got him in trouble. It was his greed that got him a prison sentence. The coins were part of the largest Anglo-Saxon treasure hoard ever discovered in an English field, most of which were found by an anonymous amateur metal detectorist. When Cockle found the coins, he kept them a secret, later illegally selling them for 15,000 British pounds, about $20,000. In the UK, it's illegal to resell 2 or more coins that are at least 300 years old and have more than 10% gold or silver. The government considers that a treasure, and since Cockle's coins were just a fraction of a larger cachet of 131 gold coins found, the officer was sentenced to 16 months behind bars. Only 8 of the 10 coins he sold have been found. It took over 6 years for the remaining coins to be unearthed. Most are 85 to 90% gold Frankish tremisses, which are small coins from the 6th century. 9 of the coins are larger Byzantine currency, each with 3 times the value of the tremisses. In the cachet, a pendant, gold bar, and 2 other gold jewelry pieces were also unearthed. Experts think they were buried sometime around 600 AD, before England unified. When experts unearthed the remaining coins, they noticed the cachet had been previously disturbed, leading them to believe that the hoard had been moved or the other coins had been removed from it at some point in history. With such a large quantity of almost pure gold coins, it's most likely that the hoard will be given to the British Crown under the 1996 Treasure Act and placed in the Norwich Castle Museum. This important find isn't just a dazzling display of wealth, it shows how the early Anglo-Saxon economy worked. Sadly for David Cockle, he also got a lesson in how the justice system works too. Did you know there were laws in place that require surrendering found treasure? Do you think they're fair? Tell us your thoughts on this in the comments. Number 6. Lockdown treasure hunting boom. As more and more people have to deal with the endless lockdowns during the pandemic, they've kept themselves entertained with new hobbies and pastimes. For families in the UK, they've done more than take up baking bread and learning a new sport. Instead, they've started treasure hunting in droves, and as it turns out, some residents are pretty good at it. Since the start of the pandemic, these amateur archaeologists have kept the tradition of treasure hunting alive, and in return, they've been handsomely rewarded with thousands of antiquities. A whopping 47,000 discoveries have been made, including hordes of coins and a medieval seal matrix used by a bishop to leave his mark in wax seals on letters. As experts took a closer look at the seal, they found that it showed the bishop standing in his vestments with the inscription, David, God's messenger, Bishop of St. Andrews. They also realized that because the seal was made with lead alloy, it was probably a contemporary forgery, used to authenticate copied documents. As amazing as these finds are, hobbyists aren't keeping them to themselves. They're using modern technology to share the news of their incredible finds by updating a database that tracks all antiquities for professional curators. A lot of interesting artifacts have been unearthed over the past 2 years by budding sleuths. A copper alloy Roman furniture fitting dating from circa AD 43 to 200, featuring the face of the god Oceanus, was located. It has stunning, intricate seaweed fronds that frame the god's face, as well as tiny dolphins and serpentine creatures on Oceanus' temples. 50 gold coins from South Africa, minted in the 1970s during the apartheid era, were found buried north of London, and another cache of 63 gold coins from the 16th century, featuring King Henry VIII, were also found in the New Forest area. When a local resident was weeding their garden, they are extremely rare and feature the initials of the king's wives, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour. The number of coins is much more than the average wage during the Tudor period, so it will take some time to figure out if the hoard was someone's savings added to over time, or if they were buried all at once. Over 10,000 more discoveries than those made in 2019 have been recorded, which has kept the British Museum busy. Anytime someone finds an object that's more than 300 years old, the rule is they have to report it to the local authorities, who assess the item. If it's of value, it goes to the British Museum to be surveyed and preserved. But that doesn't mean the person who found it walks away empty-handed. They're paid for their discovery. Not bad for a day spent digging in the garden. Have you ever found anything valuable with a metal detector? Share your experiences in the comment section. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos. Number 5. Viking Sword. 2 metal detectors on the Isle of Man uncovered a stunning rare Viking sword in the northwest area of the island. Somehow it survived for over 1,000 years in the soil until the 2 men located the fragments, including an intricately decorated hilt or handle, and a pommel or weight on the top of the hilt that was carved to look like a set of knuckles. It is the first Manx Viking sword of its kind discovered on the island, that sits in the Irish Sea and has a storied history of Viking occupation that dates back to the early 800s. The Manx are an ethnic group whose language descends from Middle Irish. They originated on the island and share significant Norse and English influences. Over 4 centuries, Vikings spent time there, at first trading and then constructing more permanent settlements. Over time, other Viking-era artifacts have been uncovered on the Isle of Man, like fishing hooks, needles, and hoards of silver. But this was the first set of highly decorated sword parts found there, with experts believing they date back to 900 AD. As archaeologists cleaned and studied the sword, some wondered if it could have belonged to a male Viking, whose grave had been located buried in a ship on the island. In Viking custom, their warriors are buried with everything they needed in the afterlife, but this particular man didn't have a sword. Even though only some parts of the sword were uncovered, experts had the most important part. They were able to tell from the decoration on the hilt that it probably came from Norway, and that it was made from copper alloy. For those who want to own a piece of history, the sword fragments aren't up for grabs, as they are put on display at the Viking and Medieval Gallery. Number 4. 13-year-old discovers Hordes. Sometimes it pays to hang out with your parents, even if you think they're not cool. When a 13-year-old decided to tag along with her dad's metal detectorist group to South Cambridgeshire in England, she had a bit of beginner's luck when she uncovered a Bronze Age hoard. Among the massive cache of 200 items, she found axe heads, blade fragments, and other copper alloy parts that experts now think date back to around 1300 BC. At first, Millie Hardwick, her father and grandfather didn't have much luck with their exploration, but after a quick lunch break, they decided to try a different part of the field. When Millie's metal detector went off, her father dug around in the dirt. When he unearthed a solid object that he joked could be part of an axe, the group didn't expect that he was spot on. They continued to dig, finding more axe parts and a silver coin. The dig was then immediately halted and covered until the next day, when a team of professional archaeologists visited the site. After examining the dig site, they confirmed the discovery, as well as a second hoard located nearby by another group on the initial trip. The discoveries are being studied to confirm if they are related or just happen to be buried near one another. Either way, the items were sent to the British Museum so they can study them and determine their value. If they are declared a treasure, the landowner and Millie will split a reward. Until then, the young girl and her father continue to head out on the weekend excursions in the hopes of finding even more buried treasures. Number 3. The Galloway Horde. Leave it to the amateurs when it comes to locating hidden treasures. A collection of more than 100 stunning artifacts was unearthed in Scotland in 2014 by a treasure hunter, and experts at the National Museum Scotland describe it as the richest collection of rare, unique objects from the Viking era ever found in Britain and Ireland. It took 6 years to clean off all the dirt, mud, and debris from the objects, but as archaeologists did, they revealed breathtaking pieces, including silver arm rings, silver bullion, and a rare, intricately decorated cross. Multiple layers of objects were found in the hoard, with ornate silver jewelry and a silver jar filled with beads, brooches, and bracelets among the finds. Before experts could get a close look at the delicate items, they decided to use special 3D imaging to examine the jar to keep the items safe. But they were able to tell that the wool that had wrapped around the vessel to protect the contents dated to around 680 and 780 AD. Experts were also able to tell that 4 different people or groups buried the hoard around 900 AD, adding more mystery to their understanding of Scotland in the age of the Vikings. The silver vessel holding the bulk of the jewelry had decorations featuring leopards and tigers that suggest it was made in Central Asia. But why were the items separated into multiple layers instead of all being buried together? Researchers think it was part of a decoy strategy, with the richer treasures being buried under those that weren't as valuable. As conservationists work to preserve the items, researchers continue to search for clues about the origins of the items, which will be put on display at the National Museum of Scotland. Number 2. Rare Roman treasures in the UK. One of the best things to come out of the metal detectorist craze is how amateur treasure hunters are helping professional archaeologists locate hidden objects. When a hoard of items was found in 2002 in the UK, it brought experts to the area in search of other undiscovered caches. Even though it seems like finds like this happen every day, it's extremely rare. So imagine the surprise when another hoard of rare Roman items was found near the first. Artifacts that range from the Roman, Bronze, and Iron Ages were discovered at what experts think was the site of a Roman settlement that was once home to up to 300 people. Among the priceless items included a silver Roman figurine, coins, and other treasures, pottery, oyster shells, and animal bones that were buried to mark funerals or feasts were also unearthed. At another nearby dig site, 3 jugs and a bronze dish were located, along with mosaic glass dishes made in Alexandria, Egypt, around AD 200, and the handle from a bronze jug. To the average person, bones and pottery might not seem significant, but they tell us as much of a story as gold and silver artifacts do. They show the way of life in ancient times, and also help to paint a picture of how cultures lived and who they treated with. Number 1. Danish Gold Hoard. Only a few hours after taking his new metal detector for a spin, a Danish man discovered a stash of 1500-year-old gold coins from the Iron Age, when bronze implements and weapons were replaced with iron as technology and culture advanced. When Ole Ginnerup Skytes went exploring, he didn't expect to find one of the largest and most important discoveries in Danish history. As he set out with his detector in the village of Jelling in southwestern Denmark, the device activated, and when Skytes moved aside the soil, he found something he first thought was a can of food. But what he found was so much more valuable than the amateur detectorist could imagine. 2 pounds of gold pieces from the 6th century. The gold medallions are known as bracteates, flat, lightweight coins with motifs stamped into one side. But these coins were very different to our typical coins, and experts are still stumped at the strange magical symbols and runes protection imprinted on the medallions. One of the medallions shows the Norse god Odin, who was a magician and the god of poets. Another group of coins in the cache show Constantine the Great, who ruled the Roman Empire from 306 to 337 CE, evidence that Jelling was a powerful center of trade linked across Europe. Not only does this make the find priceless, but it also makes them unique, giving researchers a peek into the lives of other cultures who lived in the region before the Vikings settled there. The stunning craftsmanship and the size of the cache point to a nobleman or member of society with high status, and his identity might be closer to being revealed than first thought. Experts also discovered the ruins of a village longhouse at the site, which means they might be able to piece together the owner of the coins sooner rather than later. The cache is believed to have been buried around the time a volcanic eruption covered the sky in ash over Scandinavia. Whether the owner buried the cache there to protect it from invaders, or as an offering to the gods to protect them from a widespread famine that hit the area hard, it will take more research to figure that out. Number 8. Tattooed mummies. Did the ancient Egyptians invent tattooing? Some experts think so, and it was a clue hiding in plain sight that convinced them. Researchers at London's British Museum were shocked to realize that 2 mummies in their collection were sporting what could be the world's oldest tattoos. The idea came from figurines of ancient Egyptian females who had tattoo-like markings, inspiring archaeologists to wonder if real-life women from the Middle Kingdom period might also have skin art. At first, researchers thought dark markings on 2 of the mummies were smudges of dirt, but using infrared imaging, the team revealed animals and various symbols tattooed onto the 500-year-old mummies. 2 horned creatures thought to be wild bull and Barbary sheep were found on the man's upper arm, while the woman's upper arm and shoulder were decorated with S-shaped designs and linear markings. Tattoos like these have been found on mummies from 2000 BCE and in other places too, like the temple complex of Deir al-Bahari across the Nile River from where these 2 were originally found. The mummies were found in the desert 25 miles south of Luxor, but unlike most Egyptian mummies, these weren't embalmed. Instead, they dried naturally in their graves, preserving this ancient skin art and giving experts insights into how ancient cultures adopted ornamental designs from pottery and engravings as body art. They also showed how even without embalming, the mummy's features were still well preserved. The male mummy, once known as Ginger, still had red hair. The discovery of this ancient body art was a groundbreaking one, showing that tattooing was in Africa a millennium earlier than experts originally thought. Number 7. Incan mummies. You might think if you've seen one mummy, you've seen them all, right? Well, one look at the way the Inca mummified their most important citizens will change your perspective on this ancient practice. The Incan civilization wasn't the first to artificially preserve those who died, especially since the mummies of ancient Egypt are so incredibly well known. However, thousands of years before that, the Chinchorro, who lived in what is now Chile, were preserving the dead. There's one big difference between the way these hunter-gatherers embalmed the bodies of their dead, however, that might give you nightmares. The Inca believed they needed to give the mummies the ability to continue to move freely, even in the afterlife. So they came up with a method that preserved their dead, but in a very unique way. Andean mummies weren't laid out in classic poses seen in ancient Egypt, with the bodies wrapped in linen bandages, laying on their backs, and with their arms crossed over the chests. The Inca arranged the bodies in the fetal position, and then wrapped them in leather or cloth bundles. But their wrapping method wasn't the only unique thing about the Incas' mummification methods. They treated these mummies as though they were still alive, draping them in lavish textiles and jewelry, with the living descendants serving them food and drinks. This created a group of mummies known as Illapa, the most powerful Inca emperors among them. When an emperor died, he was preserved and tended to by his family members. But another strange ritual also took place. The incoming emperor gathered all the previous rulers. To show his power, he would take his place on the throne, sitting stone-like, surrounded by his dead predecessors. This ritual showed how, even in death, the rulers of the past still played a vital role in the traditions and power of the Inca civilization. Number 6. The Gold-Tongued Mummy. Did the ancient Egyptians figure out a way to speak to the dead? Some archaeologists think the discovery of 3 gold-tongued mummies could be proof. Despite grave robbers ransacking 2 tombs 100 miles south of Cairo, experts were able to save a number of important grave goods along with 3 mummies. Inside the 26th dynasty tombs, a limestone sarcophagus shaped like a woman held the bodies of a woman and a 3-year-old child. In a separate tomb, a male mummy was untouched. Other priceless funerary objects were found in the man's tomb, including canopic jars with his organs, scarab amulets, and 400 figurines. Even though experts are still working to figure out who the mummies belong to, the discovery of 3 gold-foiled tongues, one belonging to each of the tomb's inhabitants, might shed some light on their identities. In ancient Egyptian culture, there is a belief that by giving an individual a gold tongue, they could speak with the dead. Some even thought it gave them a direct line to Osiris, the god of the underworld. with another mummy on Egypt's Mediterranean coast also found with a golden tongue months before the family tomb was unearthed. One can see how ancient Egyptians tried to give their dead everything they would need in the afterlife. What do you think was the purpose behind the golden tongues? Tell me your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Number 5. Mummified monk statue. With so many cultures practicing the art of mummification, it's not strange to realize that each one has their own methods of preserving their dead. But when a museum in the Netherlands wanted to find out more about a statue in their collection, they ended up discovering a mummy that had been hiding in plain sight. Researchers in possession of a millennium-old golden Buddha statue wanted to know what was hidden inside, so they brought it to a Dutch medical center and asked the team to use modern technology to help them find out the truth about what was inside. Imagine their surprise when CT scans showed the mummified body of a Buddhist monk sitting in lotus position was looking inside. Experts weren't caught totally off guard, given the fact the statue was part of an exhibit with mummies from all over the world. But the question about how the monk's body got inside the statue still nagged at researchers. Doctors performed a few different tests to find out more about the mummy of the Buddhist master named Li Quan, who died about 1,000 years ago. But the answer might have been more than they bargained for. Monks believed that they could transform themselves into something known as a living Buddha, and it was a gruesome process they did to themselves. During the self-mummification process, monks spent up to a decade eating specific foods that sustained them but still starved their bodies in an effort to train their internal systems to preserve more easily. The diet consisted of nothing more than nuts, berries, tree bark, and pine needles, with less and less food consumed over time. Not exactly the breakfast of champions, but the process worked, slowly reducing the body fat and moisture, which helps corpses to decay. But that wasn't all. They also had to eat specific herbs and nuts that prevented bacteria from growing. And they also had to drink a poisonous sap that repelled insects and acted as embalming fluid. If you thought all of this was gruesome, there's more to the process. It took years for the monk to starve himself enough, but when the end was near, he was buried in an underground chamber, sitting in the lotus position, with only an air tube to breathe through. Every day, he had to ring a bell to let others know he was still alive. But when the bell finally stopped ringing, the tube was removed and the chamber sealed with the monk's body inside. 3 years later, the tomb was unsealed. If the mummification was a success, the monk would celebrate. But if the process didn't take, worshippers had to perform an exorcism on the body and rebury it. It was rare that the self-mummification process worked, but when it did, like it did for Li Quan, the mummy would be placed inside a gold-painted papier-mâché statue to live out his dream of being celebrated as a living Buddha. Number 4. Disfigured Chinese mummy. Tomb robbers are a threat to ancient treasures still waiting to be discovered, but for a group of thieves in the Xiaolong wetland area of China, they may have gotten more than they bargained for the day they set out to rob an ancient tomb from the Qing dynasty. When archaeologists got the news that a tomb had been ransacked, they raced to the scene to see if there was anything left to be saved. Imagine their surprise when they found 2 coffins and a body left behind. It didn't take them long to realize why the body had been abandoned. The 200-year-old female corpse inside one of the coffins was disfigured, with a gruesome expression frozen on her face, her legs curled underneath her, and parts of her limbs missing. But one of the most stunning discoveries were long scratch marks along the inner walls of the coffin. The thing is, the body hadn't been mummified. Normally, the body should have rotted away, but for some reason, it was still in pretty good condition, except for the missing and broken limbs. Sadly, archaeologists didn't have much to go on as they tried to figure out who the woman was. Tomb robbers took mostly everything that had been in the tomb with the coffins, which made it that much harder to figure out who the woman was and why she was buried there. But experts used modern technology to restore a patch on the woman's coat. On it, an embroidered scene of clouds, a hill, and a leopard could be the very clues they needed to solve the mysterious woman's identity. Next to the coffin, a wooden sign also offered insight into who the woman was. A small piece of silk cloth attached to the sign read, "A coffin of the arrogance of Morgan Zhu," which indicated the tomb belonged to someone with the surname Morgan Guoluo. Using the name to search historical records, experts were disappointed not to find anyone with that last name. Returning to the coat for clues, archaeologists found that the pattern on it was the official uniform of a third-rank military commander in the Qing dynasty. But only men served in that position. So even though the coat belonged to the missing male body taken by tomb robbers, it could mean the mysterious woman had ties to an ancient military commander, one researchers are still working to identify so they can reveal the identity of the mysterious woman. Number 3. Ancient mutilated farmers. Why would the rise of farming in ancient Chile inspire a surge of extreme violence? That's what experts wondered after analyzing the remains of 194 people who lived between 1000 BC and 600 AD. Skeletons and mummies that belonged to farmers found in the Atacama Desert showed shocking signs of mutilation. Researchers think the rise in farming was the cause for conflict and violence among these ancient people, and the evidence is in the way some of their dead were brutalized. The remains of one woman showed obvious signs of trauma, with the skin on her face stretched and her mouth pulled into a higher than natural position on her face. But what would have made anyone do this to another person? Some archaeologists think a variety of hardships, including limited resources, infighting, and competition for fertile land and water, could have been the cause. And when they took a closer look at the remains of other ancient people from the same region, they were in for a rude awakening. Almost 1/4 of all the remains had some signs of violence, with men the most likely to have injuries. Most suffered from head trauma, but others also had wounds on their bodies. But the attacks weren't always fatal. Some of the bodies showed signs of healing, meaning they survived whatever conflict they'd been in. But that doesn't make it any less violent. There were so many different injuries that researchers had a hard time keeping up. From mutilations to fractured bones and severed digits, to projectiles lodged in some of the bodies, it's obvious that life in ancient Chile was a struggle to survive. There was one more clue waiting for researchers in the remains. After analyzing bones and teeth, they were able to tell that 2/3 of the bodies belonged to people who ate food from places other than the Atacama Desert, meaning they may have been outsiders trying to colonize the area, only to come into conflict with those who didn't take kindly to the new arrivals. Even though the area was small, it was one of the richest, most fertile areas in northern Chile, which would have been the very reason why so many fought to live, but ultimately died there. Number 2. Imposter mummies. Could a group of mummies from China be imposters? That's the question archaeologists posed when they did a study on a group of prehistoric people who used the desert to naturally preserve their dead. But when researchers set out to get a better picture of the mysterious Terran mummies, they found the Bronze Age relics were not who they originally thought. For centuries, the mummies were believed to be descendants of Indo-Europeans who migrated to the area around 2000 BC. But a new genetic study shows that the group were an indigenous group instead. The mummies were found in China's western deserts. Their red hair, non-Asian facial features, and their clothing, made from wool felt and leather, wasn't that common in the region, set off a firestorm of controversy over what culture the mummies belonged to. And their burials were quite unique too, with some bodies placed in large boat-shaped wooden coffins, grave markers shaped like oars, and even food strung around their neck to feed them in the afterlife. Some scientists use these details as evidence that the Terran people migrated there from southern Siberia or Central Asia. But a new study might finally solve the mysterious origins of these people. DNA extracted from various teeth shows the oldest of the mummies was buried around 4,000 years ago. There was no indication that they had genetically mixed with any neighboring people. Instead, experts now believe that the Terran people descended from ancient northern Eurasians who lived about 10,000 years ago, after the end of the last ice age. Interestingly, scientists were able to compare these mummies with others found on the opposite side of the Tian Shan mountain range that divides the region. The Dzungarian people did show that they shared DNA with both indigenous ancient North Eurasians and herders from the mountains of southern Siberia. No one is sure why the Terran people were genetically isolated, but given that they did seem to trade with other cultures, for whatever reason, these ancient people stuck to their own kind, eventually disappearing and leaving only their perfectly preserved mummies for future archaeologists to study. Number 1. Secret Mummy Workshop. Finding one of ancient Egypt's famed gilded mummy masks is an exciting prospect for all archaeologists, but uncovering a secret workshop could offer hints about the secretive practice of ancient mummification techniques. At least that's what archaeologists thought when they uncovered the workshop at a dig site near the Saqqara necropolis. Not only did they find a workshop and an adjoining burial shaft, they also came across sarcophagi covered in jewels, 5 mummies, and a gilded silver mummy mask, all in the ancient city. The mummification process took place above ground, with chambers below for either single or shared burials. Inside the workshop, a collection of oils and measuring cups were unearthed, giving researchers potential clues about how the ancient culture concocted the perfect mix of embalming fluids to preserve pharaohs and the Egyptian elite. The site was originally unearthed in the late 19th century, but a new team wanted to have a closer look to see if they could use modern technology to find things that had been left behind. Lucky for them, they followed their hunch. And because of that, they may finally be able to crack the code of how the ancient Egyptians preserved their dead. Mummies that to this day can be seen in museums around the world.
Number 8. Offerings to Osiris. In 2012, a team of archaeologists from the University of Toronto uncovered a cache of animal mummies that reveal rituals carried out by ancient Egyptians to their god Osiris, one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. In 3 different hall temples from the time of King Seti I, the team found 83 mummified animals, including cat, sheep, goats, and dogs, all over 2,000 years old. Early Egyptians would bury their kings at the northern side of the Upper Egyptian town of Abydos. They considered this area Holy Land. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, was allegedly buried there after he was killed by his son Set, the god of the underworld. According to ancient Egyptian myth, his wife, the goddess Isis, pieced his body together and brought him back to life. She then delivered their son Horus, who then killed his uncle Set. Osiris and his family were buried in Abydos, where a huge temple, as well as several chapels, were dedicated to him, built over time by different ancient Egyptian kings. Marianne Pols-Wegner, the archaeology team leader, believes the animal cache was created in a later period than the temple, and these animals were offerings for Osiris. The dog mummies could represent the ancient Egyptian jackal god, Wepwawet, who precedes Osiris. The team also uncovered an offering chapel and 2 tombs from the reign of King Thutmose III. A collection of faience and clay Ushabti figurines were also unearthed along with a royal wooden statue. Number 7. Hidden grotesque art. Imagine you decided to do a few renovations to your home and end up finding a priceless treasure hidden in your walls. Well, that's exactly what happened to Calverley Old Hall, a medieval manor in Yorkshire, England in 2021, and restorers couldn't stop celebrating the discovery. The Elizabethan murals were found behind 19th century plaster in one of the bedrooms. Anna Key, director of the UK's Landmark Trust, told The Guardian, "The hidden artwork believed to date the reign of Queen Elizabeth I is the discovery of a lifetime." Among the medieval discoveries were griffins, Tudor roses, and the emblem of King Henry VII's wife, Catherine of Aragon, were all found in the chamber of Calverley Old Hall. The stunning discovery was almost lost to time. What started as a simple restoration by the Landmark Trust ended up uncovering the first hints of something special in the form of colored stains on exposed timber. After removing the plaster around the stains, the team realized they had found floor-to-ceiling 16th century wall paintings that filled the entire chamber. But how did the paintings get there? And why were they hidden? Could it be because of their macabre subject matter? The artwork took its inspiration from the discovery made by a young man who fell into the buried chambers at Nero's Golden House in the heart of ancient Rome. It was a lavish complex made from ivory and filled with jewels, but there was an even more elaborate secret waiting underground that kept people talking. Underground, the young man found himself in a cave system with grotesque decorations, including hideous shapes and distorted forms painted on the walls. The trend for this exaggerated grotesque style spread to the Low Countries and Germany, and after being reproduced in books, the art form made its way to England, eventually finding its way into the chamber of Calverley Old Hall. Even though there was only one room adorned with the elaborate mythical creatures and trailing vines, the historical find will not be forgotten, as experts work to uncover and restore the lavish artwork with ties to the 5th Emperor of Rome and the last of Rome's first dynasty. Number 6. The Dropa Stones. An archaeological expedition in the late 1930s revealed a series of secret subterranean caves between the borders of China and Tibet. But it's what researchers found in those caves that has inspired wild theories that have continued to circulate the globe for decades. Inside, Several small bodies and over 700 round stone discs were uncovered, immediately sparking rumors of who and what had been hidden alongside them. At first glance, the complex system of tunnels looked more like storerooms than natural caves. Their squared, glazed walls seemed to have been carved from the mountain with a tool that used an extreme source of heat. But it was the bodies that were most startling. Each one measured no more than 4 feet tall, and they were neatly arranged as though they were placed there for worship. The unknown creatures also had long, spindly arms and legs, and their heads were disproportionately larger than their bodies. Things got weirder as researchers continued exploring the tunnels and found cryptic symbols carved into the walls. Countless pictographs, which are used to show words or phrases of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth, with lines of dots connecting them, were found etched into the cavern walls. This type of writing is one of the earliest known forms of writing, and it has been discovered in Egypt and Mesopotamia from before 3000 BC. Could these pictograms have been in the underground tunnel system that long? As researchers tried to find out the answer, they were stunned by the discovery of a 9-inch wide stone disc with a perfectly round hole in the center and grooves spiraling out from the middle. 715 more discs were later located inside the cave, each with the same design and microscopic hieroglyphs embedded in the disc. Naturally, everyone wanted to know what the symbols on the discs meant, but they were immediately confiscated and placed in the storage of the Beijing University so the public wouldn't try to read the mysterious etchings. When a Chinese scientist took up the task of deciphering the message on the stones some 20 years later, his discovery was considered so controversial and he was forbidden to share it. But 2 years later, he went rogue, publishing a paper with his translation. Now known as the Dropa discs, they tell the story of a space probe that crash-landed in the Himalayas carrying an alien race known as the Dropa. After looking for refuge in the cave system, the Dropa were discovered by the local Han tribe, who fearfully killed some of them. The remaining Dropa retreated to the cave, but were unable to repair the spacecraft, and they remained stranded on Earth. Even today, connections to this strange story survive. 2 tribes who still call themselves the Dropa and the Han still live in the area where the stones were discovered. Anthropologists wanting to know the truth about these strange beings have studied the modern-day tribes and found they share similar traits with the bizarre bodies located in the cave. Each of the tribe members have a similar pygmy stature, with thin bodies and abnormally large heads. Could these people be the descendants of the Dropa aliens? Or are they simply a smaller race of people mistaken for the mythological aliens who supposedly crash-landed in the Himalayas and left their mysterious stone discs behind? With tests conducted on the stones revealing there's no way they could have been carved by the tools of primitive people would have had, it's looking more and more likely that the Dropa stories were left behind by a race that came from another planet. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. The Peri Reese Map. While cataloging items in a library in Istanbul in 1929, a German theologian named Gustav Deismann came across a map drawn on gazelle skin parchment. Deismann immediately recognized the outline of South America, so he rescued it. But it wasn't until he took a closer look that he realized he stumbled upon something special, a map that would continue to be a topic of intense controversy in the world of cartography for years. The map, known as the Peri Reese map, was drawn in 1513 by a Turkish cartographer, Hagi Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, who had served as an admiral in the Turkish Navy. The admiral claimed to have used 20 different maps as references to create Peri Reese, including ones from 2nd century Greece, as well as maps from Portugal, Arabia, and even one drawn by Christopher Columbus. As Deismann continued to study the map, he realized it had one major shocking feature. It showed the landmass of what we know today as Antarctica almost 300 years before the continent had ever been discovered. But that was just the beginning. The depiction of Antarctica resembled how the continent looked before it was covered with ice over 6,000 years ago. Some theorize the map actually depicted South America and not Antarctica, but others aren't convinced. They believe Antarctica was originally connected to South America, and when there was a shift in the Earth around 9500 BC, the continent moved thousands of miles south where it became covered in ice like we know it is today. As experts continued to study the map over time, more shocking discoveries came to light. The map was drawn with a style known as Mercator projection, a method that wasn't used until the late 16th century. If this map was drawn in the 1500s, how was it done in a style that hadn't even been developed for another 20 years? Cylindrical maps were used by the Greeks, among others, to create maps that showed their knowledge of the Earth as a sphere. But the Peri Reese map was way ahead of its time, and its accuracy wasn't proven until 1760. But that doesn't explain how Peri was able to create such a detailed map hundreds of years earlier. Some experts believe the information used to draw the map was older than 4000 BCE, much earlier than the noted date on the gazelle skin parchment. Some believe the source was an ancient civilization that had the skills to not only travel the ancient world, but to accurately chart the lands they visited. No one knows for sure if the map shows Antarctica or not, and until there is proof to pinpoint the accuracy of the Peri Reese map, the controversy continues. Number 4. Alien stone statue in Guatemala. In 1987, a mysterious photo of a giant stone head discovered in the jungles of Guatemala was printed in a small newsletter. But just as experts set out to uncover the truth behind the strange statue, they discovered the site where it was located had been destroyed by anti-government rebels. Some wondered if the damage to the statue came from rebels using it for target practice, or if there was some other reason they'd obliterated the stone head. By the time researchers made it to the site, the statue's nose had been shot off. The eyes and mouth of the nearly 20-foot-tall statue were also ruined. Sadly, fighting in the region kept researchers from conducting any other studies until years later, when a group of filmmakers who wanted to prove that the Mayans had made contact with extraterrestrials visited the site. They claimed the monument dated to between 3500 and 5000 BC, and that it had been placed there by a superior civilization. Other similar stone statues can be found all around the world, including the statues at Easter Island, the Great Sphinx in Egypt, and even the Pascual Abaj Monument, a massive stone idol in Guatemala left behind by the Mayan civilization. Some also wonder if the stone statue is just the head, visible to the naked eye, or if the statue could possibly have a body that's been buried but not yet excavated. The stone monuments on Easter Island, originally thought to be heads alone, were later shown to have bodies underground. Even Egypt's infamous Sphinx was completely buried up to its shoulders in sand until the 1800s. Maybe the Guatemala stone head still has more secrets to share. Number 3. Mythological Bridge a reality. Could a mythological bridge between India and Sri Lanka, believed to have been created by the Hindu deity Rama, be real? The landmass spanning the sea between the two countries has been written about since the 9th century. But is it just a natural phenomena, or was it built by the beloved deity? In a book that chronicles Rama's life, gods were thought to fly on ships, and giants and monsters walk the earth. Even though those stories might seem like fiction, some think the tale about the stretch of land isn't a myth. In the myth, Rama's army of ape men, known as the Vanara, built the bridge with rocks and boulders as large mountains, so Rama could save his brother's wife, Sita, who had been kidnapped by a 10-headed demon king named Ravana. It took 5 days to complete the bridge, allowing Rama to transport his army across the ocean to save Sita and kill Ravana. If you thought the entire story was just a myth, think again. Researchers have extensively studied a real landmass of shoal and sandbanks that stretches for 31 miles and connects the two countries, and what they've uncovered is fascinating. Even though it is now covered by water, it served as a passable route as late as the 15th century. A survey of the bridge showed it was made from boulders that were put there purposefully and not stones that had fallen into the sea. With evidence of ancient quarrying in the area and materials from shore placed on the sandy bottom of the ocean to build the bridge, all the evidence points to a man-made structure. But could an ancient race of ape men be the ones behind the bridge's construction? Or was the story describing humanity's early ancestors? At the time the bridge was built, Homo erectus was evolving from the first group of primates who wore clothing, lived in huts, and were able to use tools. They were larger than previous species and showed early signs of civilization, which could explain the mythical ape men in the story of Rama's bridge. Whether you believe the stories of the Vanara described our earliest ancestors, the land bridge is very real, and it was built by someone for a purpose researchers are still trying to decipher. Number 2. Ancient Canal Carvings. After being hidden for years to prevent destruction by ISIS, a stunning series of ancient rock carvings are now seeing the light of day. The 3,000-year-old carvings were finally uncovered in 2019 by a team of archaeologists for the first time in almost 200 years. An Assyrian king is the highlight of the images, and he is shown paying homage to his gods. But what's even more remarkable about the carvings are the animals the king is traveling on. 10 of the unearthed panels show prominent figures standing or sitting on dragons, lions, bulls, and horses. Each one shows a procession of the 7 main ancient Assyrian gods and goddesses. Ashur, the main Assyrian god, is shown on top of the dragon, and his wife, Mulisu, sitting on a throne supported by a lion. Other main gods are also shown on lions, which were an important part of Assyrian culture. The lion hunt was an important symbol of royalty, and the Assyrian royal seal also shows a king slaying a rampant lion. So it makes sense that so many of their important gods and goddesses would be depicted alongside the majestic animals. The carvings were found along the walls of an ancient canal about 300 miles north of Baghdad. It was built during the 8th century BC to carry water from the Faida district, but it was filled in a long time ago. The canal became an integral resource that helped to transform dry farmland into agricultural hubs. The gods and goddesses featured in the carved panels were all shown facing the direction the water would have been flowing, which could be the final clue that they were placed there to bless the Assyrian people in the hopes that their farms would be prosperous and help to feed their people. Number 1. Nadal. The city of Nadal is a city of ruins with stone columns, walls, and platforms that were once home to an ancient group whose deeply religious beliefs have been whispered about for centuries. Modern Pohnpeians continue to believe that these sacred ruins are haunted by the Sodalar people who once ruled there. The area was abandoned centuries ago and is now mostly covered by dense jungle, but at one time, the city stretched over 200 acres of 92 artificial coral islands. The crumbling city was built between the 13th and 17th centuries by the descendants of 2 brothers who came to the area to start a religious sect who worshipped the sea. To create the unique settlement, the men used 20-foot-long columns of black lava rock to build a type of log cabin-style structure complete with thatched roofs and elevated platforms. Somehow, the ancient people were able to move 750,000 metric tons of these rocks to create the site, an average of 1,850 tons a year over 4 centuries. They did this without the help of pulleys, levers, or metal. But wait, is the island haunted? According to local legend, the heavy stones used in the construction of Nadal were brought there by means of black magic. Archaeologists have located a few possible quarry sites on the main island. However, the exact method of transportation of all construction material is not determined. But most of the city's architecture was left unadorned, giving it an intimidating feeling that might be the reason why locals think the area is still haunted by those who settled there. Rumors of the original leader's tyrannical attitude and the remote location add to the mystery and intrigue of the ancient settlement. Thanks for watching. Which of these mysterious archaeological discoveries did you find the strangest? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!